Well, hey everybody. This is Amelia Vogler, grounding and energy medicine specialist, and your host in the Energy Magazine exclusive interview series. Today, I have the very great pleasure of speaking with one of my personal spiritual heroes, Lynne McTaggart. So for 20 years, Lynne, an internationally best-selling and award-winning author and journalist, has been examining the bridge between frontier science and spirituality. Lynne is considered one of the world's top 100 spiritual leaders for her groundbreaking work in consciousness and intentionality. And what I love the most about Lynne's work is that her work is an extension of community. It's an extension of connection, and she empowers us to realize that each of us carries this great gift to make the world a better place. And she works between the microcosm of what's happening here and the macrocosm in the global sense. So today we're gonna take a little bit of time and kind of follow Lynne's journey and see where her work has led her from the beginning to this present moment. So Lynne, thank you so much. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amelia. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, you're so sweet. So for those watching, I know that many of you probably know about Lynne McTaggart. Maybe you've read some of her books or intersected with some of her work around intention. But I'd like to open our conversation today, Lynne, with taking us back a little bit in time and kind of opening the door to the origin story of your work. And I'm really thinking about the book that you wrote, The Field. And as we invoke that retrospective, I'm curious, what from that body of research and inquiry feels most alive today with what you're working with?
Okay. So, Amelia, I have a background as an investigative reporter. That's how I started out life. I started out life busting baby selling rings when I was in my early 20s with hidden microphones and tape recorders. And, and that was my first book, The Baby Brokers.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put bad guys in jail. That was my work. And when I came over here to the UK, I started getting interested in alternative medicine, largely because I had been ill and only got better after going from conventional doctors to the very outer rim of alternative medicine. I only got better thanks to a real frontier doctor who was working in nutritional medicine. So I got so interested in that and probably so boring on the subject once I got better, that we launched a magazine, well, back then a newsletter called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And this was in the 1990s. In the course of doing research for that, which was looking at what works and what doesn't work in conventional and alternative medicine, mostly what works and has been demonstrated in alternative medicine and is been poo-pooed by the mainstream, I kept coming across very good studies of spiritual healing. And I kept thinking to myself, wait a minute, if you have a thought and can take that and send it to someone else and make them better, that by itself undermines everything we think about how the world works. So I set out to try to find out why this works. And I figured in the beginning, well, I'll just talk to a couple of frontier physicists working in consciousness research and quantum physics and biologists, and they'll give me the answer. Maybe they'll tell me there's human energy fields or something. That'll be it. I'll write it up and that'll be the end of it. And, collect the advance. That was not the end of it. What I discovered when I started researching was a batch of scientists who each had discovered what essentially compounded into a completely new view of the world, a new science. And also, scientists are not very good at making this stuff comprehensible to ordinary folks like you and me. They talk in math, they talk in code. So I realized very soon into this project that I was going to have to put this all together and also decode it into plain English. So that became the field. And that was shocking in the discoveries. I mean, there were so many parts of it and so many discoveries that I had to understand and decode. The first and most important was that we're all part of a giant energy field. The other thing that was really important were some of the ideas in quantum physics, the ideas that subatomic particles aren't an actual something yet, only a potential of something, and that they only become something real. They only collapse down to a single state from their all state of all possibility by being observed. And so I started realizing that that was really key to understanding why something like intention works. And there were other scientists showing that intention, thoughts, have an effect. They're things that affect other things, everything from single-celled organisms to full-fledged human beings. So that had an enormous impact on my work. And so did the idea of the late Jacques Benveniste that each molecule is made up of a song. It has a unique sound, and its way of communication is through frequency. And also the ideas of Dr. 𝗘𝗡𝗘𝗥𝗚𝗬, also the late Dr. 𝗘𝗡𝗘𝗥𝗚𝗬, a neuroscientist, talking about the idea that thoughts are not locked inside our heads. All of our advanced cognitive function is not just encapsulated in our brain, but that our brain is much more of an antenna receiver, and that we're collecting information and beaming it out to the field. So all of this, as I say, compounded into a very radical new view of the world. And for me, it's continued to light my way, essentially. It's continued to invite me to try to bring this into the world, not only with the ideas of intention, but also in how we live our lives. Because we're talking about a new science that is about collective living and completely antithetical to the Newtonian Darwinian worldview we now have of competitive individualism.
Yeah. And from that idea of coming together, singing together, if you will, our individual molecular songs, from that was born your Power of Eight groups, right?
Yes. Well, the thing in the middle was the intention experiment, because after the field, being the hard-nosed journalist that I am, I was observing all of the popular culture at the time, and this was 20 years ago, writing about the idea that we can manifest whatever we want, that, the law of attraction, all of these ideas. And of course, the journo in me said, well, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about very subtle effects? Are we talking about curing cancer and ending war with our thoughts? And also, what happens when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time? Does it magnify the effect? So I wrote a book about all of the science of intention, but it was also an invitation for people around the globe to take part in periodic intention experiments, because I figured, well, I know a lot of these scientists now, and I also have a decent amount of readers. The field was in 30 languages by that time. So I thought, well, I just need to put them together and I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And so that's what I did. And we've run 40 experiments, by the way, to date.
Wow.
Everything from making seeds grow faster and very subtle effects on leaves, changing their light emissions, to purifying water, to lowering violence in war-torn areas and violent areas, to healing people. And 36 of the 40 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects.
Amazing.
So that brought me to the power of 8, because I wanted to scale down these big effects. We were having huge effects.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, how do I do this in a workshop? And so I was kicking this around with my team and my husband at the time. And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll put them in groups of 8 or so and have them send intention to someone with a health challenge. And my husband's a great headline writer. He's also a journalist. And he turned to me and said, I love it, the power of 8. And so that's how that happened. Then when we did this, when we put people into groups of 8, thought it was going to be a very mild effect, we were shocked to see that people with long-standing illnesses, everything from depression to cataracts to arthritis, we had somebody limping in and not limping the next day, and cataracts 80% better. So we had amazing healings. And by now I've seen thousands of people who have healed everything from stage 4 cancer to deafness, to genetic diseases, liver diseases, where this woman was really a candidate for a liver replacement, healed it in one Power of 8 session, 2 people getting up out of their wheelchairs, and much, much, much more. So we've seen extraordinary healings. And that really became the work I focused on, essentially trying to figure out what on earth was going on here.
And what do you find? Like, distill it down. What on earth is going on there?
Well, there are a lot of things. There are group effects. Even the famous French psychologist Amelia Durkheim talked about how groups have an effervescent effect. There, of course, is the power of intention, and there's no question in my mind that we do have this innate power. But I also saw that it's magnified in a group, and that a group experience of intention vastly magnifies the effect of it. And there are 2 good reasons for that, I believe. One of them is altruism. If you're in a group of 8, and by the way, it doesn't have to be 8, it can be 6, it can be 12, but 8's a nice Goldilocks figure. It's not too big, it's not too little. And 8 also has a lot of meaning in there. There's so many historic and mythic meanings around 8. The Chinese believe it's a lucky number, it's a sideways infinity sign, but it doesn't have to be 8. It needs to be a group, though. And I think the altruism piece of it is so important, because if it's a group of 8, 7/8 of the time, you're intending for someone else. And in my work over these years, since 2007, I've seen that just as many people get healed when they're the senders as when they are the receivers. So, and that has also happened in the big intention experiments too. So there is altruism, and the science. I looked into this in great detail, particularly in my book, The Bond, as well as my book, The Power of 8. Altruism is truly like a bulletproof vest. When you do things for other people, the science shows us that even mild things, or even being a volunteer, you live longer, healthier, happier lives. And when you are helping someone else, say with an illness you have, you're more likely to be healed. Altruism and community protect us from everything, from heart disease and stroke to the common cold. So we need groups. We need to not be isolated. I saw an article not long ago. It was talking about human beings and our need to belong. And it said, if we were an animal in a zoo, it should say, should not live in isolation. And I think that is so perfect. And of course, so antithetical to the isolated lives we live now. 1 in 4 Americans over 65 have no human contact with anybody. With anybody, 1 in 4. The only human contact they have is their television set, if they've got one. So, and 1 in 3 young people say they're lonely. They don't have enough friends. So we are so isolated, and that is so antithetical to what we need. So what I've seen, particularly during the times of lockdown with COVID, I had many people taking courses with me. I had a guy called Jerry who was in my master class. I think it was in 2021. And he said at the end of it, you know, I've had more love in my life than this year during lockdown than I ever have in my entire life. And the compassion was the really important bit to him. He even said, I now know what love is. And he felt so much of it. He took the class the next year and then joined another group. So he now is still active with 2 groups. So that's a big part, that altruism, that love and connection. Here's the other bit. When you do a Power of 8 group, we know this from neuroscience studies we conducted with Life University, one of the largest and most prestigious universities of chiropractic in the world. They put their whole neuroscience team at my disposal. So we did a series of studies, and we're planning some other ones too, looking at what happens to brain waves during Power of 8 groups. And we enlisted student volunteers, put them in a batch of different groups, and measured the brain waves of one individual in each group. And we discovered, to our astonishment, that very soon after starting a 10-minute intention, the person who had the EEG cap on their heads demonstrated a turning off of the parts of the brain that make us feel separate. So the parietal lobes, which sit here toward the back of the head, they help us navigate through space. They tell us what's me and what's not me. Mm-hmm. So these were dialed way down. So were the temporal lobes also involved in that. And then the right frontal lobe, the part of the brain involved in worry, doubt, negativity, that was also turned way down. So to our astonishment and the astonishment of Dr. Stephanie Sullivan, the neuroscientist who is leading the study, the outcome looked nothing like meditation. And we were shocked by that. We thought we were going to see brainwave signatures almost identical to those in meditation. They were the exact opposite. Instead of turning on alpha waves and having a preponderance of alpha waves that is slightly slowing down the brain, our brains of our volunteers were turning off. These were people whose brainwave signatures were almost identical to those of Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer, Sufi masters during chanting. Those kind of people who had been studied by the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Andrew Newberg, who was there at the time. These were people, as were my Power of 8 group people, in a state of ecstatic oneness. And that is, I think, the biggest secret sauce of why this proves healing, because we don't get to experience oneness. We all talk about being the field, and lots of people ask me, how do I enter the field? And I always say, you don't have to enter it. You are it. Your subatomic particles make up a part of the field, and they're doing an energy trade back and forth, a little energy dance with other subatomic particles out there. But we don't experience life like that. We experience life in a kind of lonely, solitary separateness. And we feel like little lonely people on a lonely planet in a lonely universe. So we don't experience being in the field, even though we are the field. Yeah. But we do during a Power of 8 group. We get to experience what oneness feels like. And I have now thousands and thousands and thousands of people saying that during the intention experiments and Power of 8 groups, they experience extraordinary energy, extraordinary, almost like an electric energy going through their hands and body, whether or not they're in the room with their Power of Eight group, by the way. Most of my Power of Eight groups are meeting virtually on Zoom. So they feel that, they feel an altered state. They have all of the qualities that Abraham Maslow, the noted psychologist, examined, were part of a peak experience, as he called it, which is entering a mystical state. But here's the kicker of the whole thing. For our study, we didn't have experienced meditators. We didn't have Sufi masters. We had student volunteers, most of whom had never even meditated before. And all they had was a very rudimentary bit of instruction from me of what to do. And yet they were transported into the miraculous. Wow. So I think it's the coming together in the group. It's the sense of oneness. It's the altered state that is the biggest part of healing.
Wow. And Lynn, what do you think gets in the way of our healing?
Great question. So many things. One of the things that really gets in the way is either belief, although I've had people heal who didn't believe one word of this. I gave a talk once, and a woman called Faith was dragged there by friends of hers. And at the end of my talk, I put people into Power of Eight groups. And there she was in a group and not believing one word of what I had to say. And she had really bad back pain. And at the end of the 10-minute session, she wasn't even the recipient. She was a sender. Her back pain disappeared. So you don't have to believe. But I would say that the biggest issue in self-sabotage is pain from the past.
Yeah.
And that is one reason why I began working and using intention to heal the past too. And something that I do in ongoing retreats. I give 1, maybe 2 retreats a year, and they are all about healing the past and using intention. And one of the things that's really interesting about the new science is that any good quantum physicist these days will say 2 things. One is that there's no such thing as time. The famous Italian physicist, quantum physicist, Carlo Rovelli, says time does not exist, not in the sequential way that we believe that it does. Human beings create sequential time. We create linear time. Time in reality is one big smeared out now. And so that really inspired me, as did information showing that patients with amnesia, so they can't remember the past, find it really difficult to imagine the future. And people who also are depressed about the past have problems imagining a better future. They can't even imagine a future. And there's no place in the brain that understands time. So all of these parts, all of these new discoveries made me realize that, well, it doesn't really matter when you do intention. And what would happen if we went back and did an intention for the past? What we're really looking at doing is changing the energy around a past event, not changing the event per se, but changing your power and the energy that you have surrounding that event. And I've found that is very, very healing of things like self-sabotage and past pain that gets in the way of people manifesting.
Yeah. And Lynn, you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have one of these retreats coming up, don't you? Healing your past.
We do. We are running a Heal Your Past retreat September 4th through 8th in 2023. And it's at this amazing place called Broughton Hall, which we discovered when we went to a conference there a few years ago. And It is a 16th century stately home, the runner-up for the location of Downton Abbey, the filming of Downton Abbey, and it's on 3,000 acres. And it's just amazing with all these kinds of historic cottages around too, where we put people who are, when we haven't, when we filled up the home. But what made us decide to hold our retreats there was the spiritual nature of the place, because the owners, Roger Tempest and his wife Paris, are very into spirituality. So they created a spiritual center where you can hold the retreat, and a spa and fire pits and labyrinth and all that sort of thing. And it was just perfect for us. And we ran one last year, and it was fabulous. And so we're doing it again. And I work, when I say we, I work with my husband, Brian Hubbard, who is the author of a book called The Untrue Story of You. And Brian discovered a whole technique he calls time light. And essentially his whole theory is the past lives on in us as though it is the present. It is an energy, that time is an energy, and that he has methods of healing it that he used to heal his own 10-year depression growing up with a very emotionally abusive father. So he has a whole method now being used by teams of European therapists and psychiatrists to heal their most intractable patients. So we've put our work together. And the other really interesting part about looking at time and trauma, and I'll use trauma as a small t, anything from a terribly, real awful sexual abuse to having a teacher humiliate you, things like that can live on in you, and everything in between, or parents who didn't love you, etc. What I've also discovered and what I work with is healing the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve in the body, starts at the neck, goes through all the major organs, and is central to controlling our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is very useful if we are confronted by a bear. We get into fight, flight, or freeze state. But somebody who's been traumatized is in freeze state pretty much all the time. Low or high level anxiety, or fight or flight. But they are in a state of anxiety, and their vagus nerve is out of whack. And so it's distrustful. It is hard for them to have the rest and digest part of it, things, but also distrustful. Now, thanks to University of North Carolina, near your neck of the woods, research, it's been discovered that one of the things that can heal and re-regulate the vagus nerve is a community, is a small group. And so I've been using Power of 8 groups to heal this kind of low-level anxiety that afflicts, and constant state of freeze that afflicts people who have had trauma of some sort.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, considering that, the social engagement system is really about reaching out, and you allow people to come into community with each other and not have to focus on themselves, and not have to focus on their history, and not have to focus on their story, and be available for someone else. That's a magical medicine for that.
Yeah, we've just seen so many people who come, who start out and they're really guarded, and you can see they are in some sort of freeze state. And it is, as I say, it is constant all the time. It gets misdiagnosed as depression. When it's not depression, it's just being frozen. Yeah. And we unfreeze that. We melt them.
That's beautiful, Lynn. And, this question or idea, I suppose, is sort of sitting in that place of, well, this question doesn't really exist if you think about it. But I saw when I was reading about this retreat, that at the end you also do this time-light method for the future. So helping people not just go into the past, but to vision outward. Did I read that right? That this is, timelessness can take us into both areas of our healing.
Oh, absolutely. We do a whole session. That's me, actually. We do a whole session. I was fascinated by a Japanese author who wrote once that having someone else, having a buddy, design your future for you is more powerful for you than doing it yourself. So I thought to myself, what if we had a whole group do that?
Mm.
So one of the things we do in every retreat of mine is to put people into groups, a Power of Eight group, as soon as they arrive. Since this was in the UK, we had all of the groups named after a British author. So we had the Shakespeares and the Jane Austens and et cetera. So at the very end, I then have the group design your future for you. And as I say, the positivity, the altruism, all of those factors really are very, very strengthening for people. And when somebody else tells you this is what you're going to do in your life, you're probably going to believe it far more than when you do it yourself. So I have them do a whole timeline for each other.
That's amazing. You can hear it when you're talking, how that group of 8 or a group of 7 on behalf of you is also pulling all these possibilities that perhaps you couldn't conceive of, eclipsed in your own small, which is really massive and huge story. So
Absolutely. And most of the people coming to this are coming because they haven't achieved what they wanted and they don't know how to, and they're stuck with baggage. I mean, one woman just wrote me and said, after we had had our reunion from last year online, and she said, she carried the weight of a really awful relationship she had had with her dad. And she knew he was going to die sometime this year. And she really dreaded it because she thought, I I'll resent him more and I'll carry this weight. And so when we were doing the retro intention and also designing the future, she was able to, and other exercises, she was able to let go of that, heal him, understand him from where he'd come from. And when he was dying, she was able to wish him well on his next journey, but also released all of that and wrote to me to say, I have dropped this heavy, heavy baggage that I've been carrying for my whole life. And so that's the amazing thing of it. But it really does happen in that the magic happens in the group experience.
yeah, you can feel it as you're talking about it. I mean, one of the things I have always so loved and appreciated about speaking with you is just I suppose it's just the journalist in you giving the facts and the studies and the science. And then right along with that, the energy that you bring through these experiences weaves a picture that's so stable and supportive. I feel like I am sitting, just above a group of 8, weaving this amazing healing string between each other and really holding past, present, future, timelessness, all possibility, all potentialities. And it's just, oh, just a wonderful invitation, because I think this is the healing that we're asking for these times, these just crazy times that we're in. And I'm curious about where is your future with this work? What's coming from this? Because I was reading about the 8 revolution, the power of 8 that's coming in the future. And I'm just wondering, how did you conceive of the revolution that's happening in your own work?
Okay. Well, I have been watching everything going on in the world, everything, from war to climate crises, to banking crises, to political crises, to you name it crises, and also the dreaded isolation we all suffered through during COVID and beyond. And many people have never got out of that. And I thought, oh, golly, this is not going to happen from the top down. We're not going to make changes from the top down. And I thought, boy, I need an army of change makers. And then I realized I've got an army of change makers. I've got tens of thousands of Power of Eight groups around the world because I wrote about it in my book, The Power of Eight, and there have been many people doing it and taking classes and all sorts of things, setting up their own Power of Eight groups. So the Eight Revolution, I thought, what if I brought them all together? Got them talking to each other on my community site, so we'd be away from Facebook and Facebook ads and all of that kind of compromising stuff. Give them a safe space, let them talk to each other, and give them free tools and I call them tools for a new world. And I've been talking about this for a long time, but suddenly the army has appeared. So what we're doing, and we just launched this, is inviting people to join this. And the tools for a new world are just simple things the Power of Eight groups can do to transform their local communities. So it can be a Power of Eight group that are all in the same community, or as many of my Power of Eight groups are, probably the majority. They might be in different places, but they can all work together as support as they start bringing some of this out to their community. And the whole plan is to create this as a ground up movement. So of change, of interconnection, because the big problem we have is twofold. Number one, we have lost the whole idea of community, of interdependence and connection. And that's one part of it. Learning to do things together to fix stuff and to fix places locally. Also, learning to do things a different way. Now, I tell everybody to watch this movie. I think it's on Netflix, called The Bank of Dave. This is a real story, and it is so amazing. It's about a guy called Dave who lives in the north of England in a small town. Much loved guy, made a lot of money with a van business, one of the biggest van businesses in the UK. So during the last banking crisis in 2008, there was a woman in the community whose husband died, and she couldn't afford the funeral. So Dave says, I'll lend you the money. And they, but you just have to pay me back when you can. She did. Other people were struggling a bit. And Dave, as I say, much loved karaoke. They're in their local pub singing, grabs the mic, is singing, a totally loved individual. Other people needing money, he loaned it to them. And he loaned hundreds of people money over the years. Every single one paid him back. So he got an idea. He said, what if I set up a bank, the Bank of Dave? And the story is all about him trying to do this, and all of the big wigs in London and the establishment trying to stop him. He finally ended up doing a savings and loan, and he's got it. And it says the Bank of Dave.
I love it.
I know, but it's an idea of doing something different, local, and changing the way we do stuff. Now, there are all kinds of ways to do that, all kinds of ways to create, not only using intention to do it, but also using different skills, little superordinate goals. There are also different ways to end polarization. So one of the big problems we have now, particularly in America, is that we are so polarized that if you happen to believe in a different political party than me, you are not spoken to, you are not invited, you are a pariah because of your different political views. So part of the tools also is how to speak to the enemy, you know, how to get over looking at people as enemies and demonizing them just because they're not like you. So there's that. And as I say, there's different ways. I have all kinds of tools that I studied when I was doing the various books that can help revitalize communities. So that's what I want to offer people. And I think when you look at history, you see that every major movement started with a small group, as Margaret Mead famously said. You know, the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, it started with a small group. Gandhi liberated India from Britain, started with a small group. Even Czechoslovakia liberated itself from the Soviet domination without a single shot being fired. Started with a small group of protesters and grew from there. So this is what I want to do. And instead of trying to say, yeah, let's protest and change the top from the top down, I personally think that politics is so corrupt now, particularly in America, is so divisive, is so stagnant and gridlocked that we're not going to get anything done by going from top down. But I think we can from just going community by community and just healing things in your community. And I've heard many people, there's a woman called Rachel that I know, who started just growing food in her backyard and started, offering that to some of the people who can't afford it. And then they started bartering back with her, offering her services back. And so it went. So she has this really lively little village that is interdependent and working together. And that sort of possibility is available to all of us in our neighborhoods.
That, extending that vision of Rachel, I'm suddenly seeing her at 65 years old and knowing that she is not one of four who is alone, and just feeling the potential of the 8 revolution. So how do people go and sign up? I'll put the link at the bottom, but what is it like? Like, what's the invitation?
The invitation is simply to sign up. And if you go on my website, you'll see a link that says free tools. And when you click on that, you get to the 8 revolution. When you sign up, it gives you a whole step-by-step of what to do. So if you're already part of a Power of 8 group, we recommend you and the whole group, as many as can joins, because then you can work together. That gives you access to our community, which is, again, completely free. And you can speak to other Power of 8 groups. And we're starting to help people learn how to do that. We also, if you're not part of a group, we give you some free tools to learn how to be in a group and how to either join an existing group or advertise for other people to join you. And by advertise, that's just putting up a note as though you were writing on Facebook. Hey, I want to be in this time zone. Anybody else want to join my Power of 8 group? And then we upload tools. Every 2 weeks, we upload another step of things to do, discussion points, action points, things you can do with the group. And you can use as much or as little as you'd like.
Lynn, awesome. I'm just going to talk to our people for a minute. Y'all, are you hearing her? I love her. This is what it just warms my heart so about your work, is about how you really do bridge that microcosm with the macro, and suddenly seeing the connection between, just me in this little town doing my own life in this great web of each of us in our own town doing for others and being connected in this great web that you're holding. Lynn, thank you so much for conversation and the work. It's just amazing. As we close, is there anything else that comes to mind or heart that you wish to offer?
I guess probably talking a little bit more about intention, because you said what trips people up the most when it
Yeah.
comes to intention. And one thing we didn't talk about is there is a technique to intention. Everybody's got the innate power inside them. But if we were a different culture, you would have been taught that as a child, how
Mm.
to intend for things. We're not. We are actively discouraged from imagining what we do as children, which is probably closer to intention
Mhm.
than than anything else. But we're discouraged, and we are told by our authority figures that it doesn't exist. So we don't get to learn what to do. But there are numerous keys to doing intention well. In my level 1 course, I teach 7 keys. In my level 2 course, the year-long master class, I teach 13. So I'll just talk about one of them, which is being specific and how important this is. Most people think when they do intention that they have to just put it out, just say, yeah, I want to be rich, or something very, very nebulous like that, without specifying exactly what they mean by that. Do they mean they want more free time or another job? Do they really mean I want $20 million in my bank account? Or do they just mean I want more time with my grandchild? So I teach them how to be much more specific and to tell the universe what you want. Because a lot of people also believe, no, if I say exactly what I want, I'm going to limit what I get. I've never seen that. I've
Mm.
always seen people get what they ask for or more. So I teach that, and I teach in various courses. I teach people how to have thoughts and words that are much more intentional. I do that with healers, as you well know. I teach healers of all varieties, from doctors to Reiki masters, that their thoughts and words also impact on their outcomes. And with intention essentials, I've got a new course coming up in a few months that is about teaching all of the essentials and helping people learn how to use the power of the group and the power of getting off of yourself, which is possibly the most powerful of all.
I think that is so important for our community, Lynn. And I just thank you so much for opening that doorway, because for a lot of energy medicine practitioners, we have been taught to open the intention for highest good, highest and best, no harm for self and others. And we leave it in that space of all possibility. And, you know, our vote matters.
Oh, absolutely. And, I created my course, Become a Better Healer with the Power of 8, largely because of my own experience. And I know you know this story. Um, I had a health issue about 4 or 5 years ago, and I couldn't get anyone to help me. I tried about 16 brilliant practitioners of all varieties, all kinds of modalities, all alternative, and they were all excellent at what they did. But their languaging was so bad that I actually started taking notes. They were saying things like, it's going to be a long and painful journey to get better, or you're a shadow of your former self. That was one of my favorites. I mean, I had to laugh at some of them. It was so bad. And I had to say to some people, do you think that's going to help me? Do you
Yeah.
think that statement is going to make me better? And so they just weren't conscious of it. And as I say, they were really good at what they did, but their thoughts and words threatened to make me worse.
Mm.
So and by the way, I'm completely well now. I'm completely back to better than ever and doing all kinds of HIT classes with 30-year-olds and various things. But it did leave me with the idea that healers need to understand that they are beaming out 24/7. Their thoughts and words are beaming out at every moment. And there was an amazing study looking at the difference between a practitioner, and this was with patients all given a placebo, all given a sugar pill. But one set of doctors used in the study were very positive, like, this will make you better. This is going to work. This will be good for you. The other group of doctors said, well, I don't know, this might work, it might not sure, but we'll give it a go. There was a 61% difference in the outcome of the patients between those with the positive statements by their doctors and those with the negative statements. So that is just one bit of a lot of science that demonstrates that thoughts and words are probably your best medicine as a practitioner. So, as I say, that's one of my jobs too, is to help practitioners of all varieties learn to use their thoughts and words to boost their energy practice, to boost their healing practice, and also to use a small group, use their patients as a small group to heal each other. That's also healing.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So appreciate this time with you.
It's wonderful being with you, Amelia, as always.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure to have the links for the 8 Revolution, your retreat, how to reach you, and I just look forward to seeing you down the road.
Oh, and me, you. Thank you so much.